So,
All right. So, first of all, our first question for you is that, can you just give a little bit of background on yourself? Who are you as a person, your educational journey, something like that?
of course, my name is Mariia, and talking about my international journey, my first international experience happened when I was around 16 years old, and I traveled as an exchange student to the United States for a whole year. And I kind of experienced it, but just a little bit, because I knew for sure I will not stay in the United States permanently. I did, however, experience such a thing as culture shock, which happened around the New Year when I had spent somewhat like 4 months in the United States by that time. I would say it is something similar, but at the same time very different, because for expat children, from my perspective, the main difficulty is that that is something permanent. So that is just a little bit of my background in terms of my own experience. Right now, I'm in the UK. I'm doing a PhD in education in the UK, and my son is here with me. He is only 8 now, and I'm looking at how he is settling in and whether he is able to adjust well, whether he experiences, as you said, any sort of anxiety or feeling out of, and perhaps because of his young age, and I wouldn't really say that he exhibits any kind of symptoms that I would personally associate with the expat syndrome.
Yeah.
And other things about my educational journey, I hold a Master of Science degree in education from the University of Oxford. So basically,
You're doing well. Tell us about your project, like who is benefiting and like who is it for?
for my research right now, because I'm researching international students' aspirations and why they want to travel and study elsewhere, I read a lot of literature around international education in general. And what I have encountered that the strength of cultural shock is not just about the personal quality of a lesson or the difference of the new educational surroundings as such, but also the disparity between the imaginary of another place, actual reality. And this disparity is not necessarily in a negative sense. It's just the expectations might be so high that the place itself is simply unable to meet them. Of course, firstly, when a person just travels to a new location, like they have this honeymoon phase when they're all happy and enjoy it. But later on, kind of like with the cultural shock, they start to notice more and more problems. But it's not because the location itself is bad or there was a wrong choice of location, but just because the life becomes ordinary and everything is not that new any longer. And what I'm trying to show through this project is that the students will inevitably encounter problems while abroad. But if they at least know that they will have these problems, they might be able to approach them with greater resilience. And the approach is storytelling. I collect the stories from students from around the globe because storytelling is the most powerful technique to embed certain messages. So just to kind of like convey this kind of message more, convey this message more effectively, build students' resilience. From my background, I had a quite traumatic experience at the University of Oxford. It wasn't really because the university was doing something wrong or I was doing something wrong, but it was due to personal circumstances. My son was just 2 years old at that time, and I took him with me, and I was still nursing, I was still breastfeeding. So basically, I had very limited amount of time for my studies, and I have missed on so many opportunities. Yeah. So Right now, I'm doing a PhD in another university in the UK, Edgehill University, but this time the experience is actually much better than I anticipated because the university is a much better fit for my personal circumstances.
That's amazing. The next question.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to ask you my question, which is, what advice would you give to students around the ages of 10 to 16 that are learning abroad in a foreign country? What do you think can be done to make their experience more easygoing, especially for kids in this age group? Please provide us with a general perspective.
I wouldn't say from 10 to 16. As I spoke before, I would probably separate it from, let's say, 10 to 13, before children hit puberty and become teenagers, and from 13 to 16, when students become teenagers and social interactions start to play a different role in how they position themselves and how they navigate. From 10 to 13, my general advice would be to just play more, to enjoy the process of communicating with others. And students between 10 and 13, often it's very difficult to guide them as such because they might not necessarily understand their own behavior and why they behave as well. So from this age 10 to 13, I would tend to work with parents so that they would help their children as they are their significant others. And like a consultant, they are more likely to inflict certain changes in their children's behavior. From 13 to 16, I would try to rule the parent out of the mentorship sessions because this is the age when students and children, they start to regain their agency, their independence, and they crave this independence and they want to be treated as independent people. So as a mentor, I will work with them one-on-one, and I would position myself as an equal rather than a person of different experience or whatsoever. And I would try to guide them in terms of behavior, how they could approach each particular situation they have a problem with. So for instance, I would give them advice such as, so a child is in a UK boarding school and he or she has a conflict with a student from another country or from a British student, and that conflict is ongoing. We might call it bullying, but from cultural perspective, what the child needs to do, he shouldn't or she shouldn't just keep it to himself, but he or she should raise this question, this concern with the school authorities. And the first person who raises this question would be in position of power within that conflict, rather than waiting till he or she had enough and let's say he or she punched an opponent. In that situation, that child who punched would be perceived as an aggressor.